And now for those of you who haven't had enough, we have that man who just will not stand still for a blank movie screen. The man who is indeed one in a million. Andrew Makowski will tell you about the great and the near-great films to further enhance your movie watching possibilities with his incomparable Cinema City.
Thank you, Chuck, for the many nice things you've said about me, and truly, I do appreciate it. It matters to me in the least what you say. You can
No, see, this week he's not going to intro you like he's been doing. He's just going to say, now here's Andrew.
I should stick to the facts, I think. Hello, I'm Andrew Makowski, your host for Cinema City, a chronicle of some favorite films playing around town this week. Cinema City is rich in film, and moviegoing can be exasperating. Which film, which special film to see? Lots of information, little editorial. Here we go. And now, as usual, for some of the goings-on in Cinema City this week. Jean Renoir's Madame Bovary. Oshima's In the Realm of the Senses. Kill and Sword of Doom. Max Ophuls' hauntingly beautiful Lola Montez. Busby Berkeley's The Gang's All Here with Carmen Miranda doing her sexy banana number. Tom, Dick, and Harry. Les Enfants du Paradis. That's a very difficult choice to make. I don't know, these past few weeks I've been mentioning a number of John Huston films, and actually I don't like him all that much. Curious. I realize the sort of mocking contempt which goes with that, the deliberate mispronunciation of words. I learned this contemptible little trick from two masters of malevolence, W.C. Fields and the writer Céline, where he both sees himself from the inside looking out and from the outside looking in. A few minutes of Walter Gutman's film. It's an earlier film.
Hello, Andrew!
Great.
Oh, it's good to be here in Cinema City.
Humbug.
And hello, all of you movie watchers out there.
Let me remind you of the 30 or so places which make up Cinema City. It's like Anthology Film Archive, the Collective for Living Cinema, the Film Forum, the French Institute, the Japan Society, the Whitney Museum of Modern Art. The definition of an expert. And a drip
Is someone who
drip,
not take someone's water.
a drip under pressure. That's me. That's the expert.
You stole my water.
Very necessary. Times of
No.
Rocky. La Chienne, The Memory of Justice, and did you get that one? The money men are watching this show. No, but the money men are out there. I understand that this show is going to be watched by VIPs. This show is going to be watched by some. Yeah.
It's animated?
I'll be animated, I hope.
Well, I know. Go into Donald now.
Strength of Strength. Well,
La grande illusion est la règle du jeu. Whatever you do, don't go on a hunger strike, because I want to see you again next week in Cinema City. This is Andrew Makowski. Good night.
Welcome to Elgin Movie Watchers podcast, and I'm here with my co-host, Steve Gould.
Hey, Chuck. Glad to be here.
And this is a special edition where we're going to be featuring Andrew Makowski.
You know, we have a few people that are triple threats, and the late Andrew Makowski was one of them, because he not only had been part of the Elgin, but he wrote for the Marble Film News and Comment, and also did a segment, Cinema City, on Movie Watch. But I know you have a special, well, it's special. I think our listeners will enjoy what you're going to be talking about right now, about your first time of meeting Andrew.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, I met Andrew originally in a radio station in New Jersey that was had some kind of a program where they were putting various people on the air with ideas to do some radio programs. And Andrew and I were both out there trying to get situated, or each got 15 minutes to audition. And that's where I initially met Andrew, and we stayed in contact. At that time, I was living with Sherry, my then wife, up in Mount Tremper, New York, which is, a few minutes west of Woodstock. And we had decided after a while I guess towards the end of 1968, that we wanted to move back to New York City. And kind of as, sort of hippies of the time, we didn't have much money. And but we did own a used Volvo, and our intent was to come to the city, sell the car, and use that money to get an apartment. So somewhere along the line, I contacted Andrew, who had an apartment in Greenwich Village, and he, offered us to stay there, until we could find a place to live, even though it meant sleeping on the floor, which we did, I think, for a couple of nights. If you want to be motivated to accomplish something, either, selling a car or getting an apartment, just
Sleep on the floor.
Yes, yes. Think of having to do that for yet another night, and you're out there working all day to get things done. But we managed to do that, and we stayed in contact with Andrew. I think we went out to eat with him a few times and socialized in his apartment, maybe our apartment. I remember going to Indian restaurants with Andrew at that was,
Yeah, or else his other favorite, which was about a block away from his apartment, was that restaurants, a sandwich shop called La Bonbonniere,
yeah,
which is right there on 8th Avenue.
Oh, yes. Anyway, so it got to a point where, had an apartment, and I was looking for work. And I mentioned to Andrew, who by this time was working at the Elgin Theater, and had suggested that maybe I could get work there. And he set up an appointment, or gave me an appointment to meet with Al Momfeld, the then a manager who was working with Ben Barinholtz. And to be truthful, I was going in for the interview, and I was saying, gee, what are they going to think of me being introduced as Andrew Makowski's friend? So, but it didn't stop me. I did get hired initially as an usher at $1.85 an hour.
Hey, big spender.
And at the time, it was a job. It was income, and $1.85 went a lot further in the end of 1969, 1970 than it did now. So really, I owe my whole connection to the Elgin itself, to Andrew Makowski, and that's why I'm happy that we're remembering him today. As you say, his connection to the Elgin itself, to Marble Film News and Comment, the publication of the Elgin. But really, it was what happened with Movie Watch that was really where Andrew came into his own.
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy, didn't he? And, ironically, Chuck, my wife Nancy and I were walking back on Bleecker Street, and there's an Italian church at Carmine called Our Lady of Pompeii. And after, the years of the Elgin and Movie Watch were over, and, it was the 80s, 90s, He had a lot of other things. I guess in a sense, he you know he maybe because he knew so much, he could annoy people with the volume of knowledge he had. But I know he had a collection of vintage movie cameras, but his other love were antiquarian books, and he had a table that he would set up every Sunday uh, next to the church. You know, he'd buy a stall there and set it up, and of course, Nancy and I would see him going by. And when we went by this past weekend, once again, the church has started allowing people to purchase, stall space there. And I looked and I remembered fondly of Andrew just waxing on to somebody who was probably bored about all of these antique books he was trying to sell.
Yeah, well, in addition to that, Andrew is also an avid photographer. He traveled with his camera everywhere and took pictures, and really great pictures. And when we first started talking about, doing a project about the Elgin, I don't know, 16 years ago, whenever that was, Andrew graciously offered to us, all his photographs and said we were, able to use whatever shots of the Elgin that he had, and that was his contribution to the effort.
I think he was quite animated by that. It was a part of his life. I know one business card that he had printed up had his name on it, and it had the name of a name and phone number of an adult cinema that he worked at, and then he also had the Elgin on the other side with its phone number. So it was a big part of his life, and I think he was very happy to think that it was going to be remembered historically, to the point that he met with, I think, you, me, and Nancy in his small little studio apartment in the village. And sadly, it was just a week or two before his sudden death while working at what, Tower Records. Yeah.
And that was back in 2004. Andrew died extraordinarily young at 60, and it really, she was shocking that he had passed, but he had health problems through his whole life, at least the time that I knew him. And
I think what took the wind out of his sails was when he got, and at that time people didn't really know that much about it. He got this Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I think that really impacted his body, and maybe that kind of stress is what precipitated that sudden heart attack. And then he left his wife Vicky, who they had a larger apartment in the village by that time, and they had two children, two girls,
10 and 7 when he passed,
Olivia and Chloe. So,
and Andrew is definitely someone in his relatively short life who enjoyed it. He was passionate about, and books and film and art, music. I mean, I remember him getting the Sunday New York Times and turning to the section, and he would go open it up and look at it and said, the pleasure pages.
that's him.
Yeah, and he did have a sense of humor. I mean, a lot of his thinking was old world and old school, I would say, but he also had some views, progressive views, usually having to do with art or music, and a lot of good memories. But it was really when he started doing Cinema City in Marble Film News and Comment, the Elgin's
Right.
publication that was given out at the theater and eventually had a mailing list and was mailed to people and became an independent publication on its own. It went from being the Elgin Marbles to just Marble Film News and Comment, and Andrew wrote Cinema City for that, which is really where the idea came from when we started doing Movie Watch, that Andrew would do a segment on camera of Cinema City.
And for those who either did not read Marvel Film News or see an episode of Movie Watch, Cinema City, even though this all kind of started with the Elgin, Cinema City was Andrew's view of what was happening for the week in the city, in New York City, and it could have something that the Elgin was showing, and maybe one week it wouldn't, but had all the other revival theaters, some of the specialty places like Japan Society and those things. So he really, well, for want of a better term, covered the waterfront with his Cinema City.
And so when it came to him doing it for the Movie Watch weekly magazine of film that was on cable TV in New York City in 76 and 77, primarily, that it was on weekly 1 hour program that was really innovative for its time. Part of it was Andrew on camera doing his Cinema City segment. I can't say that 3 times fast, I guarantee you that. And I don't even know at the time if we appreciated Andrew, the character of Andrew, the persona that existed on that show. The information was there and whatever, but his style and way of presenting things, it's still entertaining to watch today, even if you don't care about what movies were playing at what theaters or museums in 1977. It's an enjoyable thing to watch because of him.
If you look at that, it reminds me of something that is rare, but very fortunate if you have people you've met in your life that feel that way. And he could wax just unbelievably about a croissant that he's having because it tastes so good to him. And for an example, even when Nancy and I were first going over to Paris, he was just, he lit up, you could see that he was almost like he wanted to be our guided tour manager, giving us all this information and places to see and what to do. He was always that way. And even though, as you well know, over the years you've known me, I'm not a sports buff, but I know he was, and I know he'd really get into talking about his favorites, wouldn't he, on sports?
Oh yeah, he was a big Yankees fan. He also played on the Elgin softball team as a second baseman, and he would go up to Central Park whenever we would even play pickup games or whatever. So he wasn't like a stereotypical in any sense. And some people, I mean, to be honest, were put off by his intellectual or a feat or however you would categorize something, but
Yeah.
right amidst that, he was also, you know, a passionate baseball fan, and I did go to a baseball game or two with him, and of course we played ball together, and also, you know, listened to his view of the world, and here it is, you know, so many years later, after, you know, the Movie Watch program ended, and years too after, you know, Andrew died, that you know, we still think there's value and in remembering him, what he did, and the work he created on Movie Watch.
He had some weird points, even though he was not. I mean, in terms of his Jewish faith, he was not a practicing Jew, but you know, he still respected the faith in which he grew up, and it was such a dichotomy because one of the other things that fascinated him was Nazi memorabilia, and I've never understood. You know, there's two ends of the spectrum, but that's how this guy was, and I would think that in terms of legacies, you know, as long as you've made an impression on someone in your life, even if it might be a negative impression, isn't it wonderful that people remember you? And I mean, there's so many people that when you say Andrew and talking about the Elgin or Movie Watch, will say, "Oh yeah." And some remember him very fondly, and others, you know, say, "Oh yeah, boy, could he talk," or something like that, you know, which is true, but that's fine, you know.
Well, when you mentioned about the Nazi memorabilia, it just triggered a memory that there is a Cinema City segment on one of our Movie Watch programs where Andrew was gleefully talking about the fact that Triumph of the Will was being shown, and he gave a great review of the
film by
and Leni Riefenstahl, while some people might give her, you know, credit for Olympiad, Andrew saw the talents and the great art that was involved in Triumph of the Will, not, and you know, not to be, you know, in any way getting lost into the political statement, but you know, the artistic talent that was shown by Riefenstahl in the film that she made, where she had, you know, in a sense, total control of the production,
Yeah.
making this film of Hitler's speech. So Andrew, by no means felt any problem at all about doing that, and still feeling somewhat, you know, connected to his Jewish faith, and you know, antiquarian books and baseball, and you know, movies and art, and you know, fine food, and also great croissants. Or
oh yeah, I mean, he never touched aspects of his life lightly. He always immersed himself, which is you know, which is great to be said about someone, you know. And you know, it was unfortunate, like you said, that, you know, at a young age of 60. But I think also one thing that visually people could remember, and I don't mean, I'm giving this as an example. Betty Davis, when she smoked, would gesticulate with her cigarette, you know, between her two fingers, and wave it around. And Andrew would do that too. You know, it was like he was always very dramatic about things, you know, whatever it was that he was talking about, like you say, even when he was eating, whether it was Indian food or a croissant, you know, it was always great. And a lot to be said for that.
Well, for whatever reason, what you were talking about, Andrew's way of looking at things, when I came to work at the Elgin and eventually became an assistant manager, I think. And at that time, I was in the manager's office, and I always had an interest in press work and importance of publicity, and that basically at that time in my life came from political and movement work. I don't think I had done anything professionally with that. But so I saw the Elgin press list and I opened it up, and there were index cards that had 23 names on it. Now, here we were,
big time,
being this repertory theater in New York City, and in the neighborhood we were at 18th and 8th Avenue and 19th Street, there wasn't much going on culturally around us. And much of the audience, people traveled in from all over the metropolitan area to see films that were showing at the Elgin, be they, repertory films or the midnight show or whatever. And I looked at his list, and it was made up of all, well, what would say, the well-written intellectual magazines and a few and critics. But he didn't do anything to send out to popular media, from television stations, radio stations, the Daily News, the New York Post was devoid. Andrew was doing the work, but he was doing it just to a certain intellectual class.
Yeah, in the stratosphere, not dealing. Yeah, that kind of could sum up how Andrew would approach certain things. I mean, one of the toughest times, because there were times where I could have an argument with him about things, but he never ever was vitriolic about stuff. And I remember saying to him, or maybe you were the one that said it, but then he commented, and we made a comment that he was cheap, and to a certain extent, there were times that he was that way. He was saving the buck. Walk around the block instead of getting a cab or something. And he turned and he said to us, "I'm not cheap. I always buy the best things for myself."
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's Andrew.
Well, so yeah, I maybe this part would be cut, but I can give you exactly what was said. Let's see. We were standing in front of the theater talking to Andrew. He went, bought himself a cup of coffee. When he came back, I said to him, "What, you didn't bring us coffee? Andrew, you're really cheap." And he said, "I'm not cheap. I buy myself nice things." With the words, I don't know if it's important to change it or not.
This is not a negative element about the man, because it was a part of his whole being. He did look for those things. He bought antiquarian books that cost a lot of money. He would buy antique cameras and things like that. And the one thing that happened in his life that I think really showed the amount of love he could have is when he had his two children, both of his daughters. Oh my God, did he dote on those two girls? And I know maybe Olivia remembers a little, but I think Chloe might be too young to remember Andrew. But when you would meet him and he would say, "Oh, blah, blah, blah," and he talked something. What's that word? Well, I can't say it, but anyhow, he just loved the kids so much.
I didn't even know the word you were going for.
No, rhapsodically, or I don't know what word. So I got tongue tied. But
raps something.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Well, that doesn't mean Andrew rapped. No,
No.
that's one thing Andrew didn't do.
rhapsodically.
Did rhapsodically.
Yeah, something like that. But just laughing made me remember the fact that Andrew had a sense of humor and a sense of humor about
yeah.
himself, which
Oh, yeah.
people wouldn't seem to think that someone who is the way he was could laugh at himself. But we also show that a little bit in some of the video we have, and is doing
Yeah.
Donald Duck and
Donald Duck, yeah.
and being aware of himself is really part of the charm that he had, the fact that he had that sense of humor. And
Yeah. Well, how about when Joe Davies in the Santa Claus suit comes in? I mean, you could see that big grin on Andrew's face because he liked Joe and he thought this was his. What the hell's this going on?
Yeah, well, we thought the idea while he was recording a segment of Cinema City for Movie Watch, or for around the Christmas show, Joe Davies, who among other things worked as a cleaner at the Elgin, came dressed in his in a Santa Claus suit and sprung himself upon Andrew, and Andrew was definitely shocked by it.
Yeah, he was quite bemused, I'll say.
Well, you could, if you listen carefully, you could hear him say "bah humbug" on his breath. That's Andrew. So I guess we can kind of wrap this up a little bit and not keep people here too long. But Andrew Makowski was quite an individual, someone who is obviously responsible for my connection to the Elgin, and also gave us his Cinema City.
Yeah, and I mean, and personally for Nancy and I think he instilled in us some of the love we continue to have for a city like Paris, which is one of his great loves. And it's really nice when somebody's gone that you can look back and enjoy what you shared with them.
And in this case, it's even nicer the fact that we've saved digitally some of the work that he's done with this Cinema City segment on Movie Watch, and we encourage people to check those out.
And we'll look forward to next episode of Elgin Movie Watchers podcast.
Until next week in Cinema City, this is Andrew Makowski. Have a cinematic week.